New Londo lives in the shadow of Anor Londo. It gets its namesake from Anor Londo. It's in the second half of the game, which is often overshadowed by the highs of Anor Londo. But in that shadow, we see that New Londo is humanity at its lowest, stripping away any grandeur that Lordran is supposed to have. This area is in the second half of the game, so it is full of some questionable design choices, but I feel like the high points of New Londo's design are often overlooked. The design of New Londo is hollow. It is intentionally lacking something, begging us to reach out. This place is for the real yearners out there.
I yearn.
You yearn?
Oh, yes. Yes, I yearn.
I only briefly mentioned this area in the depth segment, so I hope no one minds me reiterating a bit here now that I can go a little more into detail. I love how New Londo is situated right at the bottom of the central hub of the game. This is bound to lead a lot of players stopping by here way earlier than they need to, and I think providing that kind of freedom to the player is what lends this game to being such an effective narrative experience. Anyway, I've mentioned before how the passive hollows here remind us that they are human, but they also play a part in the greater thematic narrative going on here in New Londo. The rest of the world ain't doing so hot, but New Londo is in exceptionally dire straits. They have been left here to rot in their misery, and they don't even have the sun to keep them company. I remember being so shocked when I ran into the Crestfallen down here. He always gave you advice on where to go and what to do, albeit in an incredibly snarky manner.
Since you're here, let me help you out. There are, actually, 2 bells of awakening.
He could no longer stand being at Firelink after Frampt showed up with his terrible breath. Seeing him hollow away over something that seems so trivial is so heartbreaking. But then again, who's to say that the snake's smelly breath was the real problem? We only knew this guy in passing, but still, losing that connection still hurts. I've only been here for like 5 seconds and I'm already getting into some heavy stuff, but I really can't sugarcoat this. The shock of this guy hollowing is something that feels so real. I'm not trying to make this into some big high and mighty PSA, but I mean, seriously, just check in on your people, okay? Hollowing has been a central part of this game's narrative. We've seen hollowing in the player and the enemy designs, but I feel like New Londo is the true embodiment of the concept. In these ruins, we find ghosts of the flooded city. They aren't hollows, but instead a reminder of a great tragedy. They can no longer hold a deeper connection with other people, now forced into a state of perpetual anguish and violence. Maybe this is a stretch, but I find it interesting how the ghosts stretch out their arms to reach out, but now all they do is hurt people. Okay, yeah, it's kind of dumb. That's kind of a stretch, but can you at least see the vision? Alright, enough with the ghosts. What's it actually like playing this level? Well, I think it's pretty fun for the most part. It is mainly a pretty linear path, but a few diversions let you get some extra curse items to help with fighting the ghosts. I know I was getting all serious just a moment ago, but these ghosts ambush you in such a funny way. Maybe being a ghost isn't actually all that bad. Never mind. This ghost house is one of the greatest sins of the game. It really feels like they just plastered ghost spawn points all over the place and called it a day. I do have to say though, I love the visual of the ghosts emerging from the water. Something about it's just a really powerful image to me. But seriously, this part really starts to show this area's problems. Dying at this ghost house means one long-ass trek back to it, even with the ladder shortcut you can get. Since I had to keep running through this entrance area, I guess now is as good a time as ever to mention Rickard.
Well, this is unusual. You haven't lost your head. And more importantly, you're free. How on earth? Well, I shouldn't pry. I'm Rickard of Vinheim. I was once an established smith.
He's a blacksmith who specializes in magic, but he's also stuck in this cell. Not that he would want to leave anyway.
Have you? Oh no. Don't worry. I've no intention of escape. It's safe here. I can't bear the thought of going hollow out there.
I remember when I found Rickard in my first playthrough, I was really affected by his situation. I wasn't really a magic build, but I stopped by to see him and just give him some company.
Goodbye then. Keep your head on out there. You really helped break the monotony.
And I know someone's gonna say it's just a game, but shut up, okay? I don't care. Even to this day, I like stopping by and buying a few things off of Rickert. New Londo is all about people being disconnected from one another, but it is also about the need for reconnection. We have to reach out if we want to make it in this world. When you clear the ghost house, if you clear the ghost house, then you will be acquainted with Ingward, the sealer.
Well, this is a surprise. I get few visitors, save for ghosts.
Ingward is partially to blame for this mess. He and 2 other sealers flooded this city in an effort to seal off the 4 kings of New Londo and their dark wraiths. Now that we have the Lord Vessel, Ingward believes we might have what it takes to face the 4 kings, so he gives us the key to the seal. I love how this game shows that Ingward is a pretty isolated guy by not having him say goodbye. Most characters say goodbye when you leave, but with Ingward it's just silence. He hasn't had much company to socialize with except for the ghosts. The reminder of what he did to this city is his only company. This cutscene of unflooding New Londo is awesome. I'll just let this play out. We're gonna have to leave New Londo for this next part. Ingward mentions that the Abyss isn't a place you can just waltz into.
Long ago, the knight Artorias traversed the Abyss. If you can find him...
I think the way this game nudges us in the direction of Artorias is really clever. Many players will probably remember that Andre sells a crest of Artorias for a high price. Its item description mentions that it's used in Darkroot Garden. The high price also gatekeeps this key item from early game players, having them come back when they're a little bit more richer. You could go to Darkroot from New Londo by cutting through the Valley of the Drakes, but that turned out to be too much of a challenge for me. In Darkroot, there are 2 paths that lead to Artorias. One path is through the door unlocked with the crest, and another path is in the basin. When I first played this game, I went through the crest door, cleared out the forest bandits, and then proceeded to get lost in the forest. I didn't realize that this stone building actually crossed to the other side of the forest, and I never saw the path at the waterfall until later. The route I ended up taking was in the basin, climbing up this ladder by the waterfall, and then you are greeted at the top by 3 giant cat things. These bastards screwed with me so much, and I still have a hard time with them. They roll around at the speed of sound and hit you like a truck. I feel kind of bad for killing them, but the guilt from that is nothing compared to what happens next. Deeper in the woods, there is an even larger door guarding what we are looking for. I've always been confused by this opening animation for the door. I think it's the same as the other door in the forest, but there isn't a hole for the crest, and I always assumed that we kept the crest in the door. I don't know why I'm so fixated on this one animation, it just has always perplexed me. Anyway, this grave and all the swords surrounding it is such a beautiful way of showing this knight's legacy. The sheer size of the grave and the sword compared to the other swords matches the grandiosity of Artorias' legacy. Artorias may be dead, but his most trusted companion still lives on. Sif isn't the most well-designed boss gameplay-wise, but she is easily one of the most significant fights in the series because God does this fight do a number on you as a player. This noble knight's grave is being guarded by his closest companion, and that companion is a mandatory boss. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the fight that had many players actually start to question what it is they're actually doing in Dark Souls. Why must we always fight? The music is just this howling tragedy. Sif hits like a truck, so you are getting your ass kicked while also being crippled emotionally. They make her limp too when you get her to low health. She drops the Covenant of Artorias, a ring that lets us traverse the Abyss. On the surface, it just seems like Sif is guarding the grave, but some also see this fight as her testing us. This is also kind of supported by the fact that if you do the DLC first, she'll recognize you. Whether she's testing you or not, it still hurts to have to fight her. But I do get why this moment is here. If they haven't already, The player is sure to be looking at the grander scope of this story when they fight this dog. With the Covenant in our possession, we can return to the city of New Londo. Opening the floodgates was a cool sequence, and it opens us up to an equally cool second half of New Londo. We are no longer facing hordes of ghosts, and the way you go about navigating this level is far less linear. These dark wraiths made me finally cave in and put some points into vitality. These guys are so challenging for me, so I guess I'll use this ownage as an opportunity to explain a little bit more about the Dark Wraiths, Four Kings, and Abyss. To give a little background on the Four Kings, I'll tell you this much. The Four Kings of New Londo were bequeathed with a shard of Gwyn's soul, but a certain serpent convinced them to take up the Abyss. Koth, the primordial serpent, is the opposite of Frampt, but they are two sides of the same coin. They both seek to use humanity for their own desires. What those desires are is a bit hard to say, but the fact remains true that they want to strip us of our agency. Koth can seem far more enticing than Frampt. The Dark Soul is human after all, but I don't think it's that simple. I'm still getting my ass kicked, so I can still ramble a little bit more. Koth is connected with the Abyss, but just hear me out here. I don't think the Abyss is the darkness. I know that doesn't make sense, but here is what I mean by that interpretation. The dark is associated with the human soul, but in the prolonging of the Age of Fire, people were suppressed. They were turned into pawns for the gods and lords to use. So the dark of humanity was twisted into great horrors under this suppression. The Abyss isn't so much the embodiment of humanity, but is instead a twisted reflection of humanity as a result of the oppression faced in the Age of Fire. I hope that makes some sense, but it looks like I finally got a grip on fighting the Dark Wraiths, so let's get back to that. I've always felt a little bad for Ingward, but it's hard to feel bad for him once you see New Londo unflooded. To be fair to him, these were dire times. The Dark Wraiths were gonna wreak havoc, and something had to be done. At least Ingward didn't leave the city behind, but whether that really corrects his actions is up to each person to decide. But hey, we aren't exactly perfect either. The corpse piles, mounds of flesh, and ominous dark wraiths all add up to make this easily one of the most nerve-wracking areas in the game. Even after so many playthroughs, this area is still just so intense to clear. But it isn't so much this constant anxiety. New Londo is very subdued. I've always been fascinated by the outer ruins that you can't explore. I don't see this as a fault of the game. Sure, there are areas this level could have expanded on, but I feel like it is a pretty well-developed level. I think this feeling of longing is perfect for a ruined setting. Just in general, New Londo has you reaching out into the past, only to find ghosts and regrets. We desperately want to make something out of what little we have. It's time we actually face the Four Kings themselves. The lead-up of this boss is just incredible, man. Past the fog wall, you are met with this spiraling staircase sinking into the dark. If you walk all the way down, you will see that the steps have been cut off. Taking the plunge is our only option. Our feet touch some sort of surface, and we look around. And then BAM! That health bar shows up, and you're like, huh? Okay, but in all seriousness, this is a very serious moment. The music is building up, and then you see it. That thing was a king of this land. Is it growing larger, or is it moving closer? This fight is easily one of the best in the base game. I don't care what anyone else says. Yes, the run back is quite tedious, but every other aspect of it makes up for it. The lead up in the arena, the plunge into the dark, the lack of light and proper shadows leading to perspective tricks, the inevitable arrival of another king pressuring you to be quick in your fighting. This fight is so overwhelming, but I mean, yeah, of course it is. And it's not like complete bullshit either. This isn't Godskin Duo or something. The AI plays relatively fair. The other kings usually remain semi-passive, usually opting to ominously circle you while the one that you are targeting tries to clobber you. They'll throw the occasional swing or projectile just to keep you on your toes, I died so many times getting footage, but I could hardly say I was mad. I think this fight is so much fun, but who knows? Maybe I'm just crazy. The Four Kings is such an overwhelming climax to an otherwise subdued area. A great thunderous evil is hidden beneath the silent remains of this great tragedy. The civilians of New Londo were the ones who ultimately paid the price for their power-hungry lords, forced to perpetually suffer in stagnation. One can hope that with these gates open, these spirits may finally be able to connect with the world again. I often go back to Ingward after defeating the Four Kings. Some may say him following orders was not an excuse, but what good does it do to remain in these ruins? I completely understand why people tend to just use a bow and arrow on this guy, but I don't know, just something about that doesn't sit right with me. The Dark Wraiths continue on here, fighting indiscriminately with no real cause. I feel like we have to do better than that. We have to reach out. We have to connect. Our world will be nothing more than ruins if we continue to wallow in our misery.